Iran has been at the center of global attention recently due to the ongoing protests across its cities and provinces, which have drawn widespread criticism and concern from human rights organizations and international governments alike. The Judiciary of Iran has now announced that there will be fast trials for individuals who are detained during these protests, and in some cases, these trials may lead to executions. This development marks a significant escalation in the government's approach to handling dissent, and has raised alarm both within the country and internationally. The decision to expedite trials and potentially impose the death penalty on protesters is reflective of the judiciary's determination to assert control and send a strong message to those who challenge state authority. At the same time, it exposes the tension between maintaining law and order, as perceived by the Iranian authorities, and adhering to internationally recognized standards of human rights and due process. The background to this situation is critical to understanding the judiciary's stance. Over the past months, Iran has witnessed a surge in demonstrations sparked by a combination of economic, social, and political grievances. Citizens, particularly the youth, have taken to the streets to voice frustration over issues such as inflation, unemployment, restricted freedoms, and government corruption. The protests have often been met with a firm response from security forces, which, according to reports, has resulted in arrests, injuries, and fatalities. The judiciary's recent announcement can be seen as a continuation of the government's broader strategy to curb unrest, but it also raises questions about the balance between justice and retribution. The idea of fast trials suggests an emphasis on efficiency and speed over comprehensive legal procedures, which may compromise the rights of the accused and limit opportunities for fair representation. One of the key figures in this development is Gholam Hossein Mohseni Ejei, the head of Iran's judiciary, who stated that cases related to protesters must be handled quickly to prevent any dilution of judicial impact. He argued that delaying trials would reduce their effectiveness and might embolden others to participate in demonstrations. This perspective reflects a broader philosophy within certain factions of the Iranian government, which view rapid judicial action as a necessary tool to maintain stability and prevent the spread of unrest. However, such a stance inherently raises concerns about the integrity of the judicial process and the possibility of violations of human rights, particularly when there is a potential for capital punishment. The international reaction to this announcement has been one of alarm and condemnation. Human rights organizations have repeatedly highlighted that fast-track trials, especially in politically charged contexts, often fail to provide defendants with adequate legal protection. There is a risk that proceedings may be carried out without sufficient transparency, proper defense, or independent oversight. Such concerns are magnified by the fact that executions, if carried out, represent the most severe form of punishment and are irreversible. Global attention is particularly focused on whether Iran will adhere to due process standards, including fair trial guarantees, access to legal counsel, and the opportunity to appeal. The use of expedited trials in politically sensitive cases has historically been controversial, and the current situation is no exception. From a domestic perspective, the Iranian government likely views these measures as necessary to restore order and deter further protests. The announcement of potential executions is intended to demonstrate the state's seriousness in maintaining law and order. In authoritarian contexts, rapid judicial processes are often employed as a tool of social control, sending a strong signal that dissent will not be tolerated. For supporters of the government, such actions may be seen as an appropriate and justified response to what is characterized as violent or illegal behavior by protesters. However, this perspective is balanced against the ethical and legal obligations of the state to protect its citizens' fundamental rights, even when those citizens are engaged in civil disobedience or protest. The human cost of these judicial actions cannot be underestimated. Reports indicate that thousands have already been detained in the course of these protests, and the possibility of executions introduces a profound moral and humanitarian concern. Families of detainees face uncertainty and anxiety, and communities are left grappling with the psychological impact of state reprisals. Moreover, the international community is closely monitoring developments, and the potential for executions could further strain Iran's diplomatic relations. In the current global climate, where human rights are a significant component of international relations. Actions perceived as unjust or excessively punitive may have repercussions beyond Iran's borders, including sanctions, political pressure, and reputational damage. Another important aspect is the manner in which these trials will be conducted. The judiciary has emphasized speed, but questions remain about the methods used to determine guilt or innocence. The credibility and impartiality of the courts are essential for legitimacy. Yet fast trials may compromise these principles. When courts prioritize expediency over thorough examination, the risk of wrongful convictions increases. This is particularly concerning given the stakes involved, including the possibility of capital punishment. Legal experts and human rights advocates argue that any trial lacking transparency or due process cannot be considered fair, regardless of the outcome. Furthermore, the broader societal implications of fast trials and executions are significant. The use of the death penalty as a deterrent is a controversial issue, and its application in the context of political protest raises serious ethical questions. There is a possibility that such measures may fuel further resentment among the population and lead to additional unrest rather than restoring stability. History has shown that harsh punitive measures without addressing underlying grievances often exacerbate societal tensions. Citizens may perceive the judicial system as a tool of oppression rather than justice, which can have long-term consequences for social cohesion and trust in institutions. From a media perspective, the announcement of fast trials has generated substantial attention worldwide. International news outlets are closely covering the situation, highlighting concerns about human rights violations and the potential for mass executions. Social media platforms have amplified the issue, with reports and commentary spreading rapidly, sometimes including eyewitness accounts and activist testimonies. This global visibility places additional pressure on the Iranian authorities to justify their actions and maintain some semblance of legal and ethical accountability. It also ensures that the international community remains engaged in monitoring the situation, which may influence Iran's approach in the weeks and months ahead. The judicial system itself faces logistical challenges in implementing fast trials for a large number of detainees. Handling thousands of cases efficiently requires significant resources, coordination, and procedural adjustments. There is a question of whether the courts have the capacity to conduct meaningful hearings for all detainees while maintaining fairness and accuracy. The complexity of legal proceedings, including evidence review, witness testimony, and cross-examination, cannot be easily compressed without impacting the quality of justice. These operational challenges highlight the tension between speed and fairness in the current context. Additionally, the ethical considerations surrounding the death penalty are profound. Executions are irreversible and raise fundamental moral questions about the appropriate use of state power. The potential for executing individuals without full legal recourse or thorough investigation poses serious risks of injustice. Critics argue that the pursuit of expediency in judicial matters should never come at the cost of human life and fundamental rights. While the government may argue that rapid trials are necessary to maintain order, human rights advocates maintain that the ethical obligation to ensure fair and just proceedings must remain paramount. The implications for civil society are also noteworthy. The threat of fast trials and executions may suppress dissent and discourage public participation in demonstrations or activism. Fear of severe punishment can create an atmosphere of self-censorship and limit freedom of expression, undermining the ability of citizens to engage in legitimate political discourse. This chilling effect on civil society has broader implications for the development of democratic institutions, civic engagement, and the protection of basic rights within the country. International human rights organizations, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have called for restraint and adherence to fair trial standards. They emphasize that any judicial process must include transparent procedures, legal representation, the ability to appeal, and protection against coercion or mistreatment. The global consensus is that capital punishment, particularly in cases involving political protest, should be approached with the highest standards of justice and due process. Failure to meet these standards risks condemnation and isolation on the international stage. In conclusion, Iran's announcement of fast trials, some potentially leading to executions, represents a critical moment in the country's handling of civil unrest. It reflects a judicial philosophy that prioritizes speed and deterrence over thorough legal examination and raises significant concerns about fairness, human rights, and ethical governance. The situation underscores the complex balance between maintaining order and protecting the rights of individuals, particularly in a context of widespread social unrest. As the international community watches closely, the outcomes of these trials will have lasting implications for Iran's domestic and international standing. The potential use of executions adds a profound moral dimension, making it imperative that any judicial action be scrutinized for adherence to principles of justice, fairness, and the protection of human life. The coming weeks and months will be critical in observing how these judicial processes unfold and what impact they have on Iranian society, governance, and global perception.